Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Listen in as we discuss all things business, growth, and marketing with business owners, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, founder of Roundhouse, the creative agency, Saul Edmonds.
Oh, hi everyone, and welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Imran Khan from Tech Nerds around the topic, how to outsource effectively. Imran, what's up?
Hey, Saul. Really appreciate you having me on your podcast. This is exciting.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really great to have you. So for everyone listening, what we always do on the podcast is just to give everyone listening a bit of an overview about introduction to you, like who you are, where you're from, what you do, what Tech Nerds is all about, and anything else you want to share. We'd like to let everyone know.
Yeah, sure, Sal. Hello, everyone. So basically, I'm based out of the U.S. I live in Miami Beach, Florida. Right now, I'm actually in New Jersey, just visiting some family. But for my entire brief summary of my background, I went to the usual American high school. I went to college. I studied criminal justice. I got my associates in criminal justice from a small county college in New Jersey. And from there, I went to a university, William Patterson University. It's up in New Jersey as well for finance and accounting. From there, I took my career into corporate America. I worked in finance accounting. Believe it or not, Sal, I actually got my first job at my freshman year in college. I got my first accounting job at a salary. So I always thought to myself, how do I get ahead of the game? Instead of just waiting to get my degree, right? How can I immediately take action? So I just started searching online, started applying, and I was telling employers that I'm still in school, but they liked that because I feel like they helped them on their budget. They didn't have to pay something so high for a resource to come in.
Yeah, of course.
So I started my first career in my freshman year in college. And since then I was in corporate America doing finance and accounting for small private firms that are making, a couple $100 million, all the way to very big, large conglomerate corporations that are making $600 billion a year. So I worked my way up the ladder from a intern to a staff accountant, senior accountant, all the way to a chief financial officer. So my corporate life, I bounced around probably 5-7 different jobs. Before corporate life, I was a guy who just got really bored really quick. So when I would take on a job at a retail store or a deli or something like that, pizza store, I would only last a month or two because I would get so bored. Once you learn the trade, and everything, you just want to try something new. So I was always a guy who just kept, starting something and I was okay, this is bored. I need another challenge. So I had 20 something odd jobs, the 5 years from the ages of 16 to 21. Once I graduated from, once I finished my 7 years of corporate America working in accounting and finance, a little light bulb went up in my head. I was so into fitness in 2014, 2015 that I took a risk and I started my first startup company in a fitness company. It was called Monsters in Training. And believe it or not, this is when Instagram was just starting, social media was just, starting to pick up some heat in fitness. So I was in the front. Long story short, I did pretty well. In 6 months, I was able to generate quite a lot of money, probably around close to $500,000. I was selling supplements, pre-workouts, fat burners, proteins. I had 5,000 plus brand ambassadors worldwide. And all of a sudden, when you're a rookie and you're in entrepreneurship, you kind of learn the hard way if you don't do your due diligence. So unfortunately, I didn't do my due diligence at that time. I was just so excited in growing the company. Come to find out, my designer who had designed my logo, he had somehow copied certain pieces from Monster, the drink company, Monster Energy, and also from UFC, their logo brand. So I got countless letters from their legal team saying cease and desist, and we're going to put a $3 million lien on you. And I was oh God. So I had to actually give up everything that I had. And that was my first dive into entrepreneurship, becoming successful. And failing, because once that came underneath me, I tanked. I lost everything. My accounts were flushed. Uh, I didn't have a job, and I wasn't living with my family because I was in Denver, Colorado at that time. So I had to find a place to live. So I found a nice little home in Denver. It was like in a basement though, and it did not have a bed, and did have like a little kitchen sink and stuff. It was I'm grateful for it, but it was like nothing there. It was like living in a closet. There was
Pretty
no there was
pretty
no
zen sort
sunlight
of
coming in the basement. Yeah, there
yeah,
was
pretty
no
zen.
sunlight coming in. Yeah, it was definitely someone's grandmother who owned the house, and she was the only one living in there, and I was the guy who was downstairs trying to figure out his life.
That's
Um,
funny.
so from there, I basically enjoyed the entrepreneurship world, and trying so many things. I enjoyed so much building my first company that I was like, you know what, this is so much fun. I want to help people build their companies. So lo and behold, from those experiences, I created Tech Nerds, which is a full service digital agency, and we help people like bring their vision to life, which is our slogan at technerds.com. And that's from consulting, looking at competitors, understanding what kind of positioning you want to take. Are you an established business, a startup? Do you have a unique idea for an app? And kind of consulting them through, then integrating our collaborative platform and our team, our sophisticated processes, and bringing things to life. And the edge that we have, which I think is alongside this topic, Sal, is how to outsource effectively.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of like where I bridge the gap between the U.S. Demand and being able to provide cost-effective, quality services, and helping people actually invest in themselves without burning themselves up, and not having enough belief in themselves, and being really afraid to kind of bring something to life.
Yeah, I guess it is. Like it's an interesting sort of story too, because I guess like from, say most. I mean, I don't know the statistics around, how many people who come into starting a digital, agency, which is like us too. Like we're one of those sort of people, but how many people then in that particular industry also come into it from the perspective that you have, which is originally, I guess, from more of a finance point of view. So your perspective on that is, I guess, a little bit more unique in sort of some ways, because you're, what that actually means, I'm not sure. I'll just get you maybe to elaborate a bit more on like how you feel, maybe from a consulting point of view as well. Like say a company comes to you and you're talking to them about whatever that might be, like their website, their brand, or say if you, being a full service agency, you're doing everything for them. What's the initial emphasis that you might put on that sort of conversation?
Regarding if a company I'm working with and they're trying to figure out what their next steps are, you mean?
Yeah, like say they, like with us too, people might have a existing business, or somebody's like completely from scratch. So say that person is like, I've got an
Mm-hmm.
idea like you
Gotcha.
years ago, who's gone, I want to start up a fitness business and I'm going to sell supplements. And I say they're you from the past, and they're going, I want to do this. What's like with your history of those different sorts of things, like what's
Mm-hmm.
the sort of initial conversation that you have with them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sal. So basically, what I like to do, I took a human behavioral psychology online at Stanford University, kind of get a better understanding of the psychology of humans when they're working in business and life and society. So I kind of use stuff that I've kind of read about and learned about from some professors that I really look up to. There's one professor that's at Stanford University, Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He's a neuroendocrinologist, a very brilliant man. He did a lot of studies on behavior of psychology of animals and humans. So when I go about going into a consulting, you can say, or trying to understand, we call it a discovery call at Tech Nerds. My goal is to discover their goals, understand what their real intention is. Why do they even want to do it? Because people sometimes, they don't know themselves why they want to do it. If they're doing it for the money, I always kind of start backing away and start educating them. If you're doing it for the money, Like, yes, it's gonna be good. You'll make the money, but truly you won't be happy. So trying to create a better relationship with the people that I speak with and trying to understand where they're coming from. If it's a business that's already kind of established and they just need, XYZ resources and team to help build something, it's pretty straightforward. It's just kind of getting a spec sheet, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit more engaging and fun when I get to learn about, startups, entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors when they come on board and they're like, hey, I have this really cool idea. So I kind of walk through the process of understanding where their idea was, the source, where is the root of it, how do they come up with it, what do they see it going as, what kind of competitors are in the market, and I kind of start driving information from there to get a better understanding. Once I've, securely understood exactly what they're looking for, maybe not exact, but relevantly, even based on competitors. That's where I work with my team then at Tech Nerds. We kind of all sit down together together in our conference meetings, kind of go over the specs that I collected for the scope. And then once we identify all that stuff, then, I resurface another call back to the client and kind of explain the process of how things are going to work. But I would say the most exciting and challenging at the same time is making sure that, what I'm saying and what I'm providing from Tech Nerds is valid and it's feasible. Because we do get some people that have some really insane ideas and they do have the money for it, but it's not feasible. Like the product or the idea, it's not valid. It doesn't make sense. The ROI it's not really existent, but the idea is like, it's too new. And if I feel, or if my team feels like, this person is going to spend the money in their app or their idea or their marketing, and we know that they're not going to be able to, outbeat the competitor, or they don't have enough budget, or, they're not fully invested in it, and we can tell, we will actually kindly deny working with them, because we only want to work with people who actually believe in their idea, are ready to go all in, and want to really make a difference and an impact in the market.
Yeah, and I guess there's two sides to that too, isn't there? One side is that from experience that then potentially the outcome's not going to be great. So the outcome for you, like from say a selfish perspective, I'm sort of saying this from personal experience too. That despite it maybe not being anyone in particular's fault at all, it's still going to reflect badly overall. So for everybody involved, it's not necessarily going to be great. So I mean, that's it. It is, I guess you could call it almost like a duty of care, really, isn't it? To sort of, I mean, that's a bit subjective. If you talk to different people, they'd be like, well, you don't know the outcome of this and that. And yeah, that's true. It's true to some extent. But at the same time, when you've got enough experience with similar sort of projects, you do know. You're like, and that's obviously why people come to, us, or we go to a different service provider for their expertise, So that's
I think it comes down to integrity, for us at Tech
totally.
Nerds and like my team. People will sell you the dreams today. You can find freelancers and agencies online, and you can find the best prices. You think you're getting the best deal in the world, and they'll sell you the dream. But when it comes to delivery, like, people don't deliver, unfortunately. And this is like kind of like the shark market, I'm sure you're well aware of, where people promise you something, they overpromise and underdeliver. And that's something that, I myself, before coming into Tech Nerds, was on the other side. And I've been burned multiple times. So being on the other side and going through those failures and those experiences, wasting my time, money, and energy, like I run off of that as my fuel when I think of Tech Nerds, and I'm, having having new clients and the care in my hands, making sure that we're working with integrity, it makes sense, and we're not just doing things just because the idea sounds good. The idea can sound great, and obviously, of course, like you said, Sal, to a certain degree that we don't have all the answers, but some of them are really just like the white elephant, like it's a no-brainer, like it's not going to work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, totally. And yeah, and it's just like we were saying before, like it's where subjective meets kind of reality can sometimes be a little bit of a blurry sort of line, but that's okay. I mean, like there's also points, I guess, in many sort of projects, certainly ones that we've been involved in, where you kind of like it is a little bit more unclear because the idea is really great, or and it's kind of really worth pursuing, but you do know that it either then has to be staged out in a different way to either start off smaller or in a slightly different way. But all that sort of stuff can be I guess to some extent an organic process too, depending on, because ultimately it comes back to people, right? Like somebody has to have the willingness to go, one, I really want to do this thing. Two, I'm going to, work with other people, like that sort of key thing about I want to work with you. And whether that's like you working with me or us working with a client, or a client, working with us, it still has to be as much of a symbiotic sort of process as it can be for the best result generally. I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
No, I agree. I think people have great ideas, and a lot of them kind of, for most of my experience, what I've seen with people, like everybody has ideas. Everyone has great ideas. It's the people who act on the ideas and actually take the action, and they're like, you know what, I want to try something, and they'll go online and start searching for things, and they'll come up with a service company who can help them bring their idea to life. So when it comes to actually moving to the next steps, it's like when it's going to the next steps, people are unaware of how businesses work for the most part because they've never done it. So it's especially if it's a startup or an innovator or entrepreneur. So even being an agency and working more than on 1,000 projects already, I have people come with great ideas, but sometimes, like you said, it's you can't really see ahead on really what's going to unfold. So then you go into more of like hey, here's my budget, here's what I'm willing to risk, here's what I'm willing to invest to give it a shot, and let's go with a beta or a prototype or an MVP of something of that nature. And what is the most strategic way that I can see if I can get some traction? So then there's like another option plan that's made, or it's like, okay, to make the complete product would be like this long and it's going to cost you this much. Or if you really want to just like kind of be secure and safe and see if even it's going to work, let's set up something that we can collect some data, collect some interest, so collect somebody how many people would be interested, what kind of surveys can we put out there, what kind of interesting blogs we can put out there, and get how many reads and how many interests that we can get from a campaign. So when you do a more smart approach, especially when it's a very unique idea, that's something to the new language of social media or marketing or marketplaces, then you can kind of get a better feel on kind of how you're going to go about doing it. But back to the topic of this, of how to outsource effectively, I think that's the biggest thing that people are challenged with around the world. They don't know how much things cost. They don't know what it takes. They didn't go to school for technology. They don't know they don't know programming. So they're heavily reliant on the agencies, on freelancers, on outsourcing, and they're, for the most part, to be frank, they're clueless.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that they do, many of them look for just, hey, what is the cheapest thing that I can do to make this happen? What is the cheapest way? They're not looking at anything else. And that's where they shoot themselves in the foot.
It's fraught with problems, isn't it? I mean, there's and the topic too. Like when we first was sort of introduced, and then I was thinking, there's obviously a range of different things we can talk about. Generally, the podcast goes across a range of different subjects anyway. But I thought, like, that topic of how do you outsource effectively is an interesting one, because you've got, I suppose, certain sort of cliches that people think of automatically when they think outsourcing, right? As they go, outsourcing. But just before we started our podcast, I was like, outsourcing, like, for some people, means like completely different things. For some people, it means generally in their mind, they'll be going overseas, like say we're here in Australia or in the United States, or for that matter, many places in the world, they'd be going, I'm outsourcing equals cheap, right? For some people, it might mean that. This is where their decision about what they do and how and if they're going to outsource is very closely aligned to what they define as outsourcing. As so say, what I mean, I suppose, is that if we go, I'm going to outsource, they'd be going, I'm going to go to a place over in India or in Eastern Europe or somewhere like that. That means outsourcing for me. But for other people, outsourcing means like if you're in, say, another agency and you're just, you only do brand work, you don't do any other work, and you form a relationship with another company, effectively they're outsourcing. Even if that company isn't, they're not overseas, or they might even be local, but you're still outsourcing. And I thought that's interesting because like it just sort of occurred to me. I thought, like I knew that, but it didn't, because we had this specific subject. I was going, well, that's outsourcing too. So then outsourcing effectively, wherever that is and whatever that is, and like why ever you're doing it, still comes back to what we've kind of already been covering off on some of those really solid sort of initial reasons about how to do it well, no matter why you're doing it, doesn't it? I mean,
exactly.
It's like it's that why. It's like, why are you doing the project in the first place? Like,
Exactly.
And you were asking, is it to make like $1 squillion? Well, yeah, that's awesome. But, a better question is, to get to that point are other things that you might cover off in a discovery call, or when you just get to know somebody well.
Exactly. And I think you picked up on something big. It's the underlying layer. That's really what it comes down to. Like, what is their intent of doing it? I think if someone has a strong enough intent inside themselves of why they're doing it, and you can sense their type of fire or passion, whatever it is, I think that's what separates, the successful from the unsuccessful. People with the right intention, right mindset, positive energy, and really going out there, and they know they're sacrificing, they know they're going to invest. We're talking more along of like investors, innovators, and startups, entrepreneurs. They're going to be more successful versus, someone working for a company. Let's say the company is like a very big 5,000 employees, and the person in management is in charge of outsourcing for payroll, let's say. That person is not going to be as driven to say, let me find the most competitive pricing for the right outsource. They're not, because the company's so big and, there's a budget there and they know what the budget is. So as long as they can find someone that they like, they're going to just put them on board.
Yeah,
Versus
they
on the
don't
other
care,
side,
do they? No, they don't care. They just
they
kind of,
don't.
it's just their job.
But when you have your own company, your own startup, your own investment, then you're a little bit more, careful. You want to really know. You want to interview the person. You really want to know what they're all about, what their story is, how they even started their accounting firm, or what kind of certificate they have. I think that's where the outsourcing like strategy comes in. It's people who are more in line with knowing exactly why they're hiring the person, why are they outsourcing, and also making sure they're comparing comparatively to the market.
Yeah. Have you ever gone into, like, say, this is sort of on a related subject about, the, I guess, passion, and telling one when people have passion, then telling if they're like the business owner. Have you ever gone into like a cafe or a restaurant? Like, it's more obvious in the restaurant because the person running it is usually, but not always, like the maitre d' or someone, but say in a cafe, have you ever gone in and gone, I can tell that that's the business owner? That I can tell by how they're talking to people and by how they, hold themselves. You can go, that's the business owner. I know that's the business owner. And it's sort of tied into what we were saying, because people are generally, there's that different level of passion. There's different level of like detail that put into things because they place like a completely different level of importance. And then like sometimes there's just, amazing employees that like have ownership, like have that almost same level of ownership over what they're doing too. And they, but it still comes across in the same way. There's that, there's that real sort of drive. There's obviously a real love for it often. I know that term is, used very loosely in this sort of scenario, but I think it's quite true. Like it's like in sport too. And when you were saying before about talking about passion and like those words like passion and love, you see that and you feel that in people that are are driven to do well in sport. I mean, how different is it really? Like it's a very similar human kind of drive. Like you want to do well. There's different physical things involved, of course, in sport, but a lot of it is still very mental. There's
Absolutely. Referring back to, learning about human behavior and psychology, and even like being in fitness, at the end of the day, all the feelings that we experience, I believe, they come from different chemicals in the brain that are stimulated and released. And whatever you're desiring, whenever you're working on something or playing a sport, being competitive, you'll have the same type of dopamine or endorphins released in your brain if you're really enjoying something. It could be something simple as drinking coffee and looking over at the ocean, or taking a walk with someone you're very attracted to, or it could be playing sports, and it'll all give you the same type of chemical reactions in your brain. And I think it comes down to what you program your mind and how you condition your behavior, because that's the number one thing. When you focus on something, you are programming your mindset and your behavior over and over again to create a pattern where once it's conditioned, you've programmed your brain like, hey, even though like I do not like doing cardio right now, I'm going to start running. And after a week, a month, 2 months, you've now created that pattern where you start feeling super looking forward to it, where, before you were just hating it. You're like, I don't even want to think about cardio. I want to go have a sandwich or eat some popcorn and sit on the couch. But from that, rigorous challenge that you put yourself through, that struggle, you grow that internal muscle of discipline and patience with yourself. And, this is you loving yourself and being kind to yourself, where you invest in yourself and really grow your potential by steering your focus and your energy in a direction that is going to be good for you. Problem is, many people, they cannot split the difference between emotions and logic. So people always respond and react with emotion immediately. As they say, the wise are the patient. They absorb, they understand. If there's an argument or something, they're not really focused on the judgmental part. They're more focused on the curiosity part. They want to know why the person is upset. They want to know what triggered this person, whoever it may be, or whatever the situation may be. So when you look at things in different perspectives, it really is the psychological bound that keeps people who are more wise and more successful by differentiating and having a boundary between, hey, I should keep things professional here, and also in my mindset, let me not get my emotions mixed and tied to something, and let me just look at it as logic, which is very difficult to do sometimes, especially when your emotions are involved. Because one day, 1 + 1 is 2, but when your emotions are high, 1 + 1 is -6, and it doesn't matter what the world says. It's all about how I feel.
Or you couldn't care less what 1 + 1 is. You just go 1 + 1 and goes like whatever.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean I found it interesting too, because I think you talk. There's a little bit more talk on your other website, Wolf of Digital, about sport and fitness too, and obviously makes a bit more sense now with you explaining your previous history in that too. But I personally, being someone who loves playing sport, and for many years martial arts, and still playing squash now too. Squash is my big thing that I've sort of returned to again. And the thing that I've always found recently, as I've sort of been driven to get a lot better, I've had this real sort of drive to do that. And the thing that I always find really, really curious about playing sport, I don't know whether this is me, or then I'm sure other people have this experience too, but the act of playing sport or doing something physical when you're competing against somebody else highlights different aspects of how you perceive the world in a way that I don't think you can really almost find anywhere else, because it's like a heightened sense of, say, what's an example? Like I'm trying to get better at a certain particular part of my squash game, and I'm frustrated. And I'm frustrated by the fact that I'm not at where mentally I think I should be. You know, I'm thinking in my mind I should be here because I'm probably my ego. You know, that I'm going, yeah, I should be here. I'm frustrated that I'm not there yet. So that sort of drive to get past that ego aspect of it and just get down to the nitty gritty of, what do I actually have to do to get better, and just let the process sort of unfold, highlights other things in a really clear kind of way that, I'm not sure if I'm sort of explaining it well, but it's just a curious thing that always seems to bring about sometimes like a light bulb moment where you go, yeah, that's my ego talking. That's me going, I'm here, but I'm really not. Like I'm actually not there. And I know then to get there, like the fact that then you're competing against somebody else really highlights that. But you're going, yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing, I'm good at what I do. You play somebody and you get beaten, and you go, well, I'm obviously not on the day. And because, like, say, squash is so mental, it's like such a mental game, and to be in a good psychological sort of space, you can then be, physically this, but still lose because like you're already lost in your mind, and then that just like unfolds, in that sort of way, and sometimes quite quickly, and I found that the sort of interesting you talking about that, because I guess it resonated with me because I've always found a very close alignment with sport just because I love it. And then seeing those different mental things that happen, that see the same things sort of paralleled in the business world often, or just with people, same things, but they're sort of highlighted in this different way when you play sport.
Yeah, I can see that. You make a great point, Sal. You're right. And as far as sports, it's a competitive game, physical game especially. And I think that if you nurture the ego the right way, like that's how you can become better. A lot of people, even myself, I give myself my own talks. You tend to overthink, especially when you want something really bad and you want it really quick, especially if you want to be really good at something. So we tend to negatively self-talk to ourselves, saying you're not good enough, or, you need to work harder. Like those are healthy things to say, you need to work harder. But at the same time, I learned one thing in, years and years of my life and experiences that, my faith and my belief also teaches me this. The quicker you accept things is the quicker you empower yourself to conquer them. Meaning out of your vulnerabilities come your strengths. So the most vulnerable part as a human being that we can be is when we express humility, when we accept, when, things are not going our way, they're out of our control. We just express our humility and you accept it kindly, respectfully, with love and appreciation and gratitude. And, if you're not good enough at something, whatever it may be, you are accepting inside of yourself. Like, okay, I have some work to do. So out of humility, I need to be able to accept that I do need to tell myself, hey, you're not there yet. So just be a little bit patient, be grateful for where you are, and keep working on where you want to get to, and be thankful that you got the ability to be alive right now, 6 feet above ground. Because anytime,
Yeah.
the heart can stop, and we don't control that. We don't, just like we don't control, the stars, the skies, the sun, the birds flying. That stuff happens on its own. So what makes us think that we can control what our brains, can imagine? They can't. We just kind of going with the journey of life, and we need to be able to adapt quickly, like Darwin's theory. Survival of the fittest. The quicker you adapt, the quicker you would survive. So I think accepting very quickly when you are faced with challenges, and accepting in yourself that this is a challenge, or I'm failing, or I'm in pain, is going to allow you to quickly improve your abilities to overcome these types of struggles and challenges.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think that's a very important point, and I know there's certainly I've had it in the past, and I guess culturally, it sort of crosses uh, culturally too, that idea, I guess, for a lot of people, that when people are hard on themselves about things that they don't feel that they're very good at, or that they need to improve upon, they don't do what you're saying. I mean, I've certainly been there. You just go, oh, I'm just not very good, I'm not good at it. And it's very easy to go into like a bit of a spiral. But I think it's certainly like a very empowering way to kind of accept things and move on, and just sort of add them into your I suppose you could say, like, your arsenal of tools. Then moving forward, you've gone, yeah, I've already covered that. Now I'm moving on to this next kind of level. And I guess always going back a little bit too, and just there's nothing wrong with some regular self-reflection on sort of some of those things. Maybe not overdoing it, maybe not not kind of like reflecting too much or overthinking. But yeah, it's certainly like a really good point. Just returning, I guess, with some of these different sort of subjects, because I feel like they actually all, in their own different sort of way, still tie into like the main subject about how to outsource effectively. Because there can be, and this is me reflecting now on, once again, probably my own preconceptions, if I was really honest about what I would think of initially when you go outsourcing. Your mind goes over here, or it goes over there. But then, like we've been talking about already, like, outsourcing ultimately, like a lot of things in business, and then in sport, and just in life, comes back to just people talking to people. People like having a relationship. Because ultimately, if you were going to boil it down, most things, no matter what they are, come back to a relationship in one form or another that someone is having with you. Like, I've met you for the first time. I want to do a particular project. Some of that is going to be informed by how much I like you, how much I feel I've got, potential trust in you, or how, well, a person is able to build trust, and then sort of obviously actually deliver on that too. I mean, being a key thing. But then outsourcing effectively, then it'd be interesting to hear what you think about this too. Is that like how much of that, outside of the process of what's actually being done, like the individual parts of that job, are then just the communication that you have throughout that process, from the beginning, during, afterwards, on an emotional level, but also, on a range of different things. What do you think about that, Imran?
I think being on the other side before coming to my own tech firm, uh, when it comes to working with people, because that's what it really comes down to. Like you said, it comes down to relationships and creating that trust. I think that's a main factor. So when you're outsourcing, being as the service provider, uh, you want to make sure that you have a good process flow down, and you in the company or the firm, the service provider is engineered to entertain the client on all levels, from emotional, logical, to deliverables, to delivering results. And for tech nerds, I can speak confidently that the way that we have things set up is to be an optimal way, where one, we have a discovery call, and this is part of the process. I get on the call, my consultants get on the call, we learn about the specs, we learn about the vision, we understand why or where this was sourced from or rooted from. Once we define the scope, we present it to our client, and then we educate the client on our process. How does it work? Like, once I'm boarded on, what is the next step? And then tech nerds is very simple. Once you're boarded on, the project manager is engaged. The process of the first introduction is started. Project kickoff, we call it. And in this phase, we're basically just connecting the relationship and forming a trust, saying, hey, you're officially on board with tech nerds. Project manager is going to be taking the lead. He will be the one kind of, taking on the phone calls and delegating the tasks to the team that's working on the project. And here's the access to your own personal dashboard, where you'll be able to see everything: your project, the team, what activities they're working on, what time these tasks were completed. So really creating a sophisticated, engineered, well thought out, intuitive process where the answer is already there before the question arises. So that clears up the questions, and it creates and forms that trust. And then you just have your follow-ups, and you do your testing and your reporting all the way through to the end of the project, where it's time for deployment. And when it's time for deployment, it's like more of a celebratory. It's like, we made it, and the client and on the other side feels it, because they were part of the project. They were the pilot, where they were able to see and direct, as well as being on the tech nerd side of being a collaborative partner, you can call it. And I think that's what truly makes the relationship connect with everybody.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. I think one question that I have, and this is something that I don't think, like, based on past experience, I feel like this isn't often something that we as service providers, or people doing similar things to us, have a lot of control over, because people are people have their own impressions about what their expectations are and things too. But how do you handle, or if you've had this particular situation where somebody has had the initial call with you, or they've even, say, met you elsewhere, and they've come like via word of mouth? I mean, for example, they haven't come through the website, and they've met you somewhere, and they was like, oh, I had a great conversation with Imran. It was fantastic. Like, we really got on well together. It was like, really nice guy. And their experience was really overwhelmingly amazing. And then, not like they had a bad experience then going forward. It was still good, but it wasn't as good as the initial experience with you. Like, have you ever had that experience? Like, these things, as it depends on people too. I think, like, have you ever had that experience where people have then had this expectation, maybe unrealistic, that I mean, I'm making some assumptions, and forgive me, like, if that's the case, like, that say, the experience wouldn't be as good, as, like, speaking with you. Maybe it is like it, everyone might be, even more fantastic than you, Imran. They're coming, and, but it depends on how people get on with individuals, right? They go, I had this great experience. They move on.
So, yeah, you're right. And to be honest with you, yes, of course, that happens. And I would say most of the time, like from the experiences that I've had, when that does, or if that does occur, it's more of the lack of understanding or communication, or expecting too much too quick. Because many times, when especially when working this, most of the time I also come from inexperienced people working with, like, new agency, like new idea, new money coming in, like starting something up. uh, you can make the person who's consulting, like, make it sound amazing, but as long as the person educates, the client before they're boarding, like, hey, like, there's going to be a lot of work, and there's going to be times where things are not going to make sense, or things are going to be a little bit difficult, but that comes part of the journey. So educating in advance and saying, hey, yes, we're a great firm, yes, we deliver results, but yes, you have to have patience. Yes, there's gonna be problems, there's gonna be issues, but that's what creates the relationship. Every
Yep.
time there's an up, there's gonna be a down, and every time there's gonna be a down, there's always gonna be an up. And as long as it's not too frequent, and as long as it's not too,
Yeah.
intense, and it's bearable, then you're gonna be able to achieve that goal line.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, once again, it all comes back to relationships, doesn't it? Like it's all about people. Like ultimately with whatever technology, whatever like dashboards we've got, whatever
Mm-hmm.
updates we give, however we deliver like a proof for some new design or whatever, it ultimately this is my conclusion, my own personal conclusion after being in business like for many years now too, is that it's all about people. Like it is like
100%.
it's all, you've got kind of nothing. I mean, this is a bit of a broad sweeping sort of statement, but I mean, I think it's true. Like you almost do really have nothing unless you've got a good relationship, because I mean, it doesn't work in personal lives, does it? If you've got a terrible relationship, things go bad. If you're doing it in a group of people, group of friends, things don't go. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't it be the same in business? You're still dealing with people, and it's probably heightened then even more because then there's money involved. And people are having to trust often someone that in many instances they don't know, and they've based an initial decision. Like I always view it as um, a big responsibility. If someone's going, I'm going to choose to work with you, and that's based on this information, and it's like I feel like pretty humbled by that. That they've
Mhm.
sort of made that choice. There's
Yeah,
a lot of choice out there. There's a lot of like
that's true.
often bad experiences that people have had too, and then they have to like go through it again. It's not easy.
No, it's not. And I've been there on the other side. So, and this actually happens in real life with every company. Nobody's ever 100% satisfied, no matter how good the delivery is or the results are. Some people you just cannot satisfy.
No, true.
And
Yeah.
when it does come to that point where there are certain things said and certain things not delivered, I think it's more of the focus on the leadership that the owner or the consultant takes. And if in my, experiences in life, there's two types of people that can see the glass half full, or they can see the glass half empty, being optimistic and being pessimistic through all your thought processes. So for me, it's more of like, hey, okay, we've identified a problem. We know and we agree it's a problem. So I don't give it much energy until, the validation is made between both parties that, hey, we've identified it. This is a problem. And we both agree. Okay, we stop right there. There is no further digging needing required to go there. Now the other lens goes on. It's like, okay, we've identified the problem. Now let's walk through the solution. Let's see what different solutions we can come up with.
Yep.
Because there's always going to be problems, but you have to be able to be optimistic and be a little bit wise and patient with the people you're working with, because hey, they're investing their time and their energy, and they give you the opportunity and consideration to work with them. So on the flip side, as a quality performer and a producer, and being able to nurture the client's needs, you want to be able to make sure that once a problem occurs, that you address it in a professional, respectful, and kind manner, and then you walk through to finding solutions, no matter what or how extreme they may be. You have to find out a valid solution that's feasible, it makes sense, and it can bring the entire project or process to a successful completion.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, in my own impression, say if we're talking about impressions about how things will unfold, like how a project will unfold, and my impression about how when I start any sort of podcast, I mean, with somebody, is always inevitably, so far, there's always been really different. And that's the thing that I really like about this, because it ultimately ends up being exactly the same sort of process as you do with anyone that you meet for the first time, and you're having a chat, and it's a discovery call, in its own way, its own sort of like funny way.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just happens to be a podcast. But like the impression about what the topic might mean, with someone looking at this title and going, "Oh, outsourcing. I might listen to that because I've had a bad experience outsourcing in the past, and I really want to find out how to do it better next time." Like it might mean they're going to tell me like what things you have to prepare for, things. But ultimately, I mean, there's all those things, but you don't know any of that until you get past the stuff where you get to know somebody, and then you can go, yep, I want to do this, I want to work with them. And there has to be that initial thing of like some level of trust. Like for some people, it doesn't have to be very high. They say, yeah, whatever, I'll just got to do it, price based, cheap, awesome.
It's like going to McDonald's.
Go to McDonald's.
I'll just buy it. I trust their food. I know what it tastes like.
Yeah, I need a logo. Ask a bunch of questions. I'm not interested in your questions. I just want to give it to me. Fine, that's cool. But ultimately, everyone's different. That's the great thing about us all, is that everyone's different. And from outside, I figure too that it's like it's fine and important to accept that people are going to be completely different like that, and that there's no point, like you can't change the world and you can't change what who they are. You just have to try to understand people and go, well, like we were saying before, part of this whole thing about how to outsource ultimately also meaning like how just to work with people, retitled this podcast, How to Work with People. How you could call it that too.
No,
maybe.
it's a lot more than that. You're right. Now that like you put it into perspective, it's like unfolding stories. It's like unfolding layers of it. Like, where did this person come from? What is the background story? How do they know so much? It's like it starts creating that ammunition for the person who's trying to learn about, whether or not they should go with this person or company. And I think that this is amazing, journey you're in as far as the podcast thing, because you don't know who you're going to come across and what kind of amazing stories you'll unfold. Though the title may be outsourcing, you and I have covered psychology, mindset, entrepreneurship, business investment, strategy. So, a lot of that stuff also on top of outsourcing.
Yeah, no, totally. It's a wonderful thing generally about, I think, people. And I still to this day, like I have to combat my own, preconceptions, because we all have them. You would have them, I have them, about I'm going to meet this person that looks like this, that talks like this, that is like male, female, whatever, whether we like it or not. There's like, cultural things that we've been taught that we're not really even aware that we're doing. And you go, oh, this person's probably going to be like this. And then when they're not, I love that. I always like try to remind myself that that's like, I shouldn't just don't do that, Saul, because, you know, I know I'll be doing it. I'll be going, you know, this, you know, just based on past experience, because you kind of have to, you know, otherwise you'd just be going through life. You're just, you know, confused.
Don't know what you're doing. Yeah. I think you're right. I think you have a certain profile in your experiences in your mind of like, you know, what this potentially could be like. And, you know, you have a certain expectation, which is natural human behavior. That's just how we're designed to have, you know, preconceived ideas of what something or experience or a person may be like. And I think it is quite fascinating when you start unfolding the layers as you learn about the person. You're like, whoa, like completely off guard.
Yeah, it's sort of like, actually, I'm sort of realized it's funny. It's a bit like storing some cache, you know, inside your mind about sort of past experiences. And it's good sometimes like to flush the cache, you know, to go, you know, to flush before every podcast. You know, maybe I should do that in all future podcasts. I try to flush my own cache, you know, for people, you know, that's the temporary.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Dive into it with like a fresh plate. You know, I think the way you started off was good.
Yeah, sure. Just before we sort of get to the, I guess, the final part of the podcast, I was just interested to hear a little bit more about, you talk about in Wolf of Digital about the seventh sense of business and tech solutions that you talk about. Can you just elaborate a bit on what that is, on sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I actually have not updated my website in quite some time. It's my personal brand that I'm working on, but I'm actually working on a book, and I've been working on it for about a year and a half now. It's based off those seven senses. It's really more of seven principles, I would like to say. And I will share a couple on this podcast exclusively for you, Sal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I didn't even realize it was going to be like that. That was just like a random question.
Yeah. So, you know, it's really more of the principles of becoming like successful, you can say. And I think the principle number one, it comes down to patience. A lot of people, they take it very lightly. Patience is more than just, you know, waiting. It's more of like endurance. It's more of like, you know, understanding and comprehending through the parts that are most difficult, where they feel like they're choking you, or, you know, you're emotionally beaten down inside or psychologically stressed out. And it's like in those moments of life, like you need to be able to endure a lot. And from enduring and going through the challenges and struggles, that patience is going to be like a callus on your hand from going to the gym. And that callus is going to strengthen your tolerance level, and it's going to build your character. So, you know, that's like principle number one. Principle number two is being able to uh, wow, I'm having a brain trip right now.
Go to number three.
Yeah. Principle number two is accountability. So you have to be responsible and accountable for yourself. So meaning you have to have enough measurable value inside of yourself when you verbalize something to yourself, not to the people to impress them, not to become famous and get fans, but within yourself, you make a commitment and you make yourself accountable to it, saying, for example, I'm going to start eating healthy, or I'm going to start going to the gym, you know, once, twice a week, just starting up or something. Whatever it is that you're committing yourself to, you need to make yourself accountable. When you do that and you follow through with your words and your actions follow through, you become invincible. And over time, you start building up this momentum, this energy, and then you start actually increasing your self-worth. And, you know, that goes hand in hand with patience, which is the first one I talked about, because holding yourself accountable requires a lot of patience inside of yourself. And, you know, And I just sneak this third one in there if you're interested in knowing it.
Yeah, definitely.
So the third principle is more of when it comes to having enough understanding inside of yourself where you know your limitations. And when you know your limitations, uh, you're not afraid to take risks. And when you can do that, that's where you start unfolding new chapters of your life. You know, when Sal gets thrown into a new city in a new country and has never been there before, well, Sal's gonna figure out a way to survive. He's gonna figure out a way to talk to the people, even if he doesn't speak those languages. So being put in a place where everything is new, but exercising patience and holding yourself accountable to survive, you start growing this fearless presence in yourself to say, you know, even though everything's new to me, I'm going to be able to figure it out. And I think that unfolding character comes from being a risk taker slash being fearless within yourself. And that's how you get to know yourself better. When you put in yourself, that's like in your mind in an environment that you don't know anything, but you somehow, some way, through faith, hope, and belief, you figure it out.
Yeah, really true. I think that's a fantastic way to sort of end the main part of our podcast. They're really great sort of messages, and there's certainly sort of things that I resonate with very strongly. It's great to it's great to get to know yourself better. I think we all assume we do, and I certainly, and the more, whether it's experiences, personal experiences, or, through sport or through business or sort of what have you, those, things that keep on kind of unfolding, and you go, wow, I didn't know that about myself, and just when you thought that you did again, you, it seems to be, and it should be too, like it should be a never ending sort of process. It's like one of those things that I always really, really, really love. Like when in our Taekwondo club, our grandmaster, who's now in his mid 70s, perhaps early 80s. Just one of those people who's gentle, humble, really nice person, this amazingly skilled sort of person. But that idea and the thing that he kind of embodies in people similar to him is that idea that I really love about that, even though, if anybody was able to say, they're an expert in the world at a particular thing, it would be this guy and, other people like him. If he said, I'm the world expert in this, so like, sure, I completely accept that. But he doesn't. Like he's still learning, and he obviously still is at that level. But that sort of mindset I always really love. Like there's this thing of I'm here, but it doesn't mean I've stopped learning or wanting to learn, but just keep on.
Yeah.
It's just way too interesting. It's just way like
learning is the key. Learning is the key to success.
Yeah, and it's kind of got nothing to do even with like ego or anything. It's just way too interesting and too much fun, to find out new things about whatever it is. And if you get better in the process, so be it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I'll ask you, Imran, at this point in time for a quote that you like, something that you feel like is relevant, or you just really like, that you'd like to share with everyone, if you would.
Yeah, sure, Sal. So I'll throw a nice quote out there that I think truly helped me kind of get through challenges and work my way into success and continuing to work through it. If you believe, you will succeed. Very simple. You have to believe in yourself. And the more you believe in the things that you are capable of doing, even believing in your own words when you say them and you follow through with them, you will see successes come. You will see results come. So really everything is always controlled by ourselves. And we always want to see it through that lens. We never want to give that lens and assume that, this other person sees us this way, so we must behave in that manner. And I think that's what I can leave them with, Sal. If you believe, you will succeed.
It's an oldie but a goodie. I like that one.
Yes.
Yeah. So and could you just also let everyone know the best way for people to learn more about Tech Nerds or yourself, and how to get in contact?
Yeah, sure. So you can contact my company and myself at technerds.com. You can schedule your appointment or discovery call right on the website. Or if you're interested in learning more about me and listening to my podcast, Entrepreneur Success Mindset, you can simply go to wolfofdigitalofficial.com. My website's still under design, so that'll be updated soon, and I will be producing more episodes as well. And we'd love to have you on there as well, Sal.
Yeah, that would be great. And once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure, Imran. Thank you. And
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Sal. I really appreciate it.
No worries. And so with that in mind, that's actually it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening into our podcast yet again. Before we go, please leave your feedback as well as any suggestions for topics that you would like us to discuss in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Grow Your Business Podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Grow